Hey y'all, Lauren Conlin, owner of Team Loco Fit, and I wanted to make a two-part video series, first looking at the science and then looking at the application on how to regain control of your focus and to help eliminate distractions. And I know that this is really hard, especially in today's day and age, and that's actually why I started getting more interested in this, because I found myself over the past few years being very distracted and not being able to just frankly focus like I used to. And then I started reading this book called Digital Minimalism. I cannot recommend it enough. It's amazing. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, and it really opened my eyes to a lot of these things. So for the first part, I just want to talk briefly about some of the science of why this might be happening. And then the second part will be the application on things that you can do and that I'm going to be focusing on as well to improve focus and remove some of the distractions. So first and foremost, our cell phones are hands down one of the most distracting things that we have in our world at this point. Not just social media is a huge part of it, but just the phones in general with all the notifications and the things that you can just scroll through and just really just unending, grabbing your phone. So actually in the book they talk about this. There is an app, I forget the name of the app, of course. Of course, took all these notes, didn't write that down. There's an app where basically you can download it and it picks up how many times that you pick up your phone, and it also just shows how much screen time you have, right? And screen time does not necessarily mean things running in the background. So you could be watching, listening to a podcast or audiobook or music. It doesn't even pick that up. This is just, screen time that you're actually actively on it, as well as how many times you pick it up. And the average person picks up their phone 40 times a day and spends 3 hours of screen time on their phone. And that's average. And they're showing that some teenagers are doing this for 9 hours a day, which is honestly not that unbelievable if you've seen a lot of people nowadays. And, part of that is just them growing up with it. And there's interesting research on that as well. I'm not going to cover that in this video. But in general, our cell phones are incredibly distracting. And there's this really interesting idea kind of in research that breaks are actually really helpful for us cognitively. Now, if you're doing a simple, easy task, a break can actually interrupt the flow of things and kind of get you out of it. But the more complex a task is, taking a break is actually really helpful to kind of replenish some of the cognitive depletion that you've been feeling, make you feel refreshed and kind of get back to it afterwards. So there was I found a really cool paper on taking breaks and the type of breaks that somebody took, how that impacted them. And it really just kind of shows us how important this really is and how profound cell phones really are. So I won't go through all of the details of the study. I can link that up for you guys or just tell you what to type in if you want to read that. But basically they had different groups and people were having to do these things called an enneagram, and essentially it's a hard, but you can do it. So it's taxing but not too taxing. Basically it's like a word scramble, and you have to unscramble the words and fill them out. And they would do 2 of them, right? So the first one did it, then they would take a break, do the second one. And what they did and how they measure basically how effective the breaks were is that they would see how long it took to complete the second one compared to the first one, and then also how many words you got right in the second one compared to the first one. So what they showed, they had a break with cell phones, they had a break with a computer screen, and they also had a break just nothing, they were doing the test on paper and they didn't have a break there. And then there was also a group with no breaks at all. So the breaks actually were literally them picking out a snack or something. It was college age kids hey, do this thing, get a snack, and then do a second thing. And they either picked it out on their phone, the computer, or on paper. And then there was a no break group as well. And the phone break group had the same results as the no break group. And it was statistically significant to be more cognitively depleting, which means they filled out the second one slower. And also they had worse task performance, which was they got more wrong answers. So just think about that. And honestly, what they talked about in the beginning is so what's cool about research articles and why I love reading articles is because sometimes like the paper might be cool, but a lot of times what they're referencing is awesome too. So like you might read a paper and you're like, oh, this kind of sucks, but they talked about something in the introduction or the discussion where you can see what citation they had and then go to that research. So the intro in this was pretty interesting. First, they talked about the breaks. Like I said in the beginning, like, if it's a simple task, you might not need a break. It actually might be more interrupting. But if you're doing a more complex task, a break has been shown to really help with this, cognitive just kind of drain, or depletion, not drain. Words. Words are hard for me, always. Do I ever make a video and like not mess something up? That's just really what I need to know. But in any case, so in the intro they talked about that, but they also just talked about how now people are grabbing their phones mid-task, and our brains are just not wired to be able to do all these things at once and really just kind of multitask. So there's another really interesting thing too that's known as attention residue. So essentially you'll be switching between tasks. So say you were on task 1 and then now you're switching to task 2, but your brain is still on task 1 even though you're now on task 2. So it's really, really interesting how all these things kind of play a role. And the phone grabbing, I noticed myself as I'm reading this, like I was like, oh my gosh, I do that, and you don't even realize it. Like, why am I grabbing my phone? Why am I looking at this? And one of the things too that they talked about, that Cal Newport talked about in his book, Digital Minimalism, as well as in this research paper, and other research has been done on this too, that just simply any kind of notification is so draining cognitively as well. So when we talk about breaks and how beneficial they can be, they found that the breaks were actually more beneficial when you chose when they were happening. Like, hey, I'm going to take a break at 10 a.m. versus you being interrupted. And so any kind of notification on your phone, whether it's a social media notification or a text message or anything like that, is going to be very interrupting, and you're not choosing when that interruption is happening. So it makes it even more distracting. So looking at all this research, it pretty much just shows very clearly how distracting our phones and social media are. Again, these apps are literally engineered to keep us on there longer, and to have these little dopamine hits that we keep coming back. And just the actual art of the notifications and how gravitating the cell phone is, it can be very, very distracting and create these interruptions. And then now, again, we have this attention residue. So, you were doing a task, but then you got something and then you try to go back to it, but you can't focus because now you're still thinking about it over here. It's really, really interesting. And, unfortunately too, like cell phone addiction has been shown to, has pretty much been shown to increase anxiety and depression, as well as influence sleep negatively. And they also talk about that in the book too. Like, there was some pretty crazy research, especially in adolescents, born basically after 1995, who they came up with the ability to have smartphones and technology 24/7. That group, now that they've gotten older, they're seeing so many more mental health issues. And, can you pinpoint it only on that? No, but that is a huge difference in life, and really not much of life has changed outside of the ability to be connected 24/7, which people think is actually a good thing, but it can do more harm than good. So this is kind of the first intro to science part. Clearly this was not thorough, but if you guys are interested in that article, which will then link up to other cool articles, I will put the title below. You guys can look that up and check it out. It was a free paper for download. And then part 2 of this video will be the practical application that you guys can use to apply, like, hey, how do I actually become less distracted now that I've noticed this and I want to change this in my life? Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. If you have any questions, drop them below and I'll get back to them.